welcome again to ALifeReal. My name is Darren Humphreys, and with me today is Paul Boone, and we're telling you stories from the journey. Paul, you know, we had some really great feedback from the last interview that we had with Susan, didn't we? And lots of talk about what we were talking about, and lots of interest from people. Just before we introduce today's guest, what were some of the things that you heard in terms of the feedback on our last broadcast, Paul?
Yes, thanks, Darren. We've had more feedback than we've ever had before. I appreciate it was only the fourth episode in, you know, but I think we really started to plug into what we were trying to achieve with ALifeReal. You know, just in terms of sharing those individual journeys, the honesty that Susan brought to it, the openness that Susan brought to it, I think was well received by, you know, those members of the community who have seen it. And, you know, as I move forward and I look at the guest list we've got lined up, including today's guest, I know that things, you know, that standard's going to be maintained, and we're going to start bringing new things into the, you know, into the fold as we start to open up our conversations with our guests.
That's great. Well, today it's really exciting to be speaking to someone also from the United States. Today we're talking to another mom. Here in New Zealand, it takes a little bit of getting used to calling people moms rather than mums, as you might also do with Paul in the UK. Our guest today is mum to three sons, Ryan, Christopher and Scotty. In fact, I caught her quoting herself as saying, I was born to be a mum. Oh, sorry, rather, born to be a mom. Well, hey, look, she lives with her family in Williamsville, New York. Her favourite quote is, never give up, never back down, and always have faith. Well, she's a published poet, and she's got this most awesome doctorate in education from Walden University, and the title of her, well, I guess you call it a dissertation there in the United States of America. Sorry, can't resist that, and I'm sorry, it's a southern accent. Attitudes and knowledge of professionals and parents about inclusion. You know, there's some really fantastic stuff. She describes herself as, in her blog that she writes as crazy angel mom. She's passionate about her family, and she writes about those and just the highs and lows of her journey. And so today's guest is none other than, should we call you Dr. Maybe this is a bit like Dr. Phil, Dr. Rita Sell, all the way from New York State. Welcome, Rita. Great to have you with us today.
It's great to be here. I'm not quite a doctor yet. I didn't graduate yet. Soon.
Oh, almost doctor then. That's really great. And today we just want to talk with you about some of your story and some of your journey. And Paul's going to share and maybe interject with a few questions or some of those sorts of things. But it's really great to have you with us and to be sharing stories on the journey. That's what we're really about, and we're actually connects with other people, giving people hope as well. One of the things that, just to kick things off, one of the things that was really interesting in your family, Rita, was that Scotty's the third of three of your sons. And right from the beginning, I think you've noted in some of your sharing online that things were a little bit different for Scotty. And but then when he was born, he wasn't diagnosed with Angelman syndrome straight away. Do you want to tell us a little bit about those beginning days and the things that might have highlighted that Scotty was going to be different of your three sons?
Absolutely. Actually, the pregnancy was not a good one. I was on bed rest the entire time. And I did lose his twin. I had a twin. And I didn't know that until the last part of the 8th month of pregnancy, when we thought we were going to lose Scotty after fighting to keep him for so long. And when they did a sonogram, the doctor said, "Oh, I'm so sorry you lost a twin." And Scott and I just looked at each other, and we had no idea that there was another baby there. There was 2 placentas, and only one baby. So I think our doctor didn't want to tell me in the beginning that I had lost a baby for me to stay positive to keep Scotty. So right from the beginning, it wasn't easy. He's been a fighter from the start, and when he was born, he was put in the NICU, the neonatal intensive care unit. He wasn't breathing on his own, so I couldn't hold him for the first 3 days of his life. So from the beginning, I knew something was different, something was off. But there was no eye contact. He didn't turn to my voice when I talked to him. There was no latching on to nurse. He just struggled with everything that we just take for granted that every newborn would or could or should be able to do. Be held by his mommy and nurse right away, and it wasn't the case for him. He had trouble breathing, had trouble eating, but he was the biggest baby in the NICU. He was 9 pounds, 11 and a half ounces. So the nurses loved him there. They usually don't get babies that big. So it was a struggle coming home and with the not feeding. He cried constantly, very difficult to console and keep calm, no sleeping. But the first time he smiled, I remember like it was yesterday. He was 6 months old. And I remember it just a crying fit, just in pain. I tried to nurse him, and it was just, he was crying, and I didn't know what to do for him. And so I sat him up on my, sitting up in bed, and him on my knees facing me. And there was like this look of realization, like, oh, it's that lady again. She's still here. She's all right. There's that voice I recognize, and it was the first smile. And that was the beginning of the blessings and the positive part of it, I believe. Like, he realized, you know what? She's all right. She's still here. She's still by my side. So he was diagnosed with cerebral palsy at his first 1-year well visit. He was tested for muscular dystrophy, cystic fibrosis. I switched pediatricians 4 times in that first year. I just don't like being told, let's wait and see. I don't know. So I just keep looking for someone who does know and who has an answer. So he was diagnosed with cerebral palsy at 1-year-old, and then Lennox-Gastaut epilepsy at 18 months old when he had his first grand mal seizure. And by the time he was 7, his seizures were out of control. We weren't getting any good control of it, so he ended up in the hospital about a week before Christmas. He was 6 at the time. He had 500 seizures in one day. And we ended up in the emergency room, and usually at our hospital, people fight because they're not being seen first. They don't understand the concept of triage. And when we were in there, we had the people in the waiting room rally behind us going, you've got to take this little boy. He was having drop seizures. And every time I would call the neurologist, he just kept increasing the dose. And I kept increasing the dose to the point where the seizures were getting out of control. And so we finally get seen by the neurologist on call, and he said, well, the type of epilepsy your son has, this Tegretol is the wrong medication. It increases seizures. And I said, well, it's your colleague who's been doing this. And he just looked down at the floor, and he said, I had 2 options. I can keep him in the hospital for the next month to wean him off Tegretol and introduce, I believe it was Zeratin and Depakine, and or you could take him home with instructions. I said, I'll take my son home. I'm afraid you guys will kill him here. So I took him home, and it was a rough month of weaning off the medicine that was killing him. And so I chose to keep this neurologist that was on call. And by the second visit, he was seeing him every 3 months. So after 6 months of seeing us, he said, "Is your son always this happy? Is he always this giggly? And is he obsessed with water? Does he have a fascination with water?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Your son does not have cerebral palsy. I'm sending you back to the geneticist. Your son is textbook case of Angelman syndrome." And I became very angry at the neurologist because I was finally at that acceptance stage of cerebral palsy. I reached the stage where I have hope. We're going to work with this. He started walking at almost 4 years old. He was finally eating and feeding. Past the failure to thrive stage, we were seeing successes and victories, and he wasn't going to derail this. He wasn't going to push me off this acceptance stage. And I said, "No, he doesn't have Angelman syndrome." And he said, "Mrs. Sell, do you know what Angelman syndrome is?" I said, "I learned about it years ago in my developmental psych class, and he's not mentally," I don't even like saying the R word, "he doesn't have MR, and he doesn't sit in the corner and flap his arms. He doesn't have Angelman syndrome." And he said, "There's more to it. Go look it up. When you're ready, go see the geneticist." So I Google Angelman syndrome, say there's 30 characteristics. I don't know how many there are. Scotty has every single one. He is textbook Angelman syndrome. And I just sat there and I cried because it wasn't good things that were being said about Angelman syndrome when I Googled it back in 2009. And then we ended up in the hospital because the seizures still weren't under control. So we spent 7 days in the hospital for the long-term monitoring, and all the blood work was done. And Dr. Weinstock, the new neurologist, came in, and he said, "Your son does have Angelman syndrome." I think this was sometime in June. I think we just celebrated the anniversary, like June 20th or June 21st, of being told the diagnosis. And I remember just sitting there devastated because whatever hope I had was gone.
So, sorry for picking up on your journey, the beginning of your journey. That's astounding, I have to say. Is it you go in, and this is just my assumption here, is that you've actually been through several mourning states, several grieving states of dealing with several negatives, and then having to pick yourself up each time. The first time and understanding that something wasn't quite right, you've obviously, you know, realised there are 2 placentas. You've then had a diagnosis, you know, of CP. You've already been through 4 paediatricians. You've then gone for a period of 5-6 years of care and teams around the child based on CP, and boom, another negative delivered. It's not CP, it's something completely new. You're not familiar with it. How did you cope with that first time, when your first and second negative, never mind your third and the fourth? What was, you know, I mean, I understand it's not just you on the journey as well, but, you know, what was the family unit like in terms of changing the paradigm, because you've built all of a sudden this structure in this world around you? It's CP, we're dealing with this, and this is what we're planning for, and actually it's all changed. How does that change the family dynamic? How do you deal with
that? We've had a lot of ups and downs. My 2 older boys seem to handle it differently. Ryan, who's 23 now, seemed to be the protector of me, his mom, and his little brothers. He seemed to step into the role of, no one better pick on my brother, no one better make my mom cry, and he became a stern, a little bit of anger in there, but yet full of love. Like, he definitely was the protector. And then Christopher stepped into the caregiver role at 5 years old, changing his newborn baby brother's diapers, learning about caring for him and how to be extra gentle because Scotty was such a floppy baby. So it seemed like one took a masculine role and one took more of the caregiver role, if that makes sense. But both of them equally adoring their little brother. And to this day, Christopher is very involved in his care, learning the meds, the dosage, how to get him to sleep, things like that, where Ryan kind of watches and observes from afar, protecting us, and if he does hear like a doctor did something or a therapist pissed me off or a teacher didn't do what I wanted to do, Ryan's there to rebuild me up and give me my strength and confidence back and say, don't feel defeated, you got this. And so very interesting roles. And the journey that my husband Scott and I have been on has not been an easy one. I tend to take care of everything, and he's always there in the background, and I think I've been unfair to him of not giving him credit. I think I'm coming to the realization that men and women just deal with things differently. Not better, not worse, just different. He doesn't. It's taken me a while because I always wanted him to be right there with me doing this, going to doctors, and I wasn't giving him time to grieve in his way. I needed him to be what I wanted him to be for me, and I did not treat him fairly. And we've been struggling. We've been apart for several years and living together but apart. And he actually moved out last March, and hasn't been easy. But there's always been a base of love there, and a base of respect. And he's moved back 2 months ago. He's back home, and yeah, I'm starting to get teary-eyed. We're still struggling. We're still struggling like men and women, husbands and wives do. But I think the love that we have for our son just supersedes everything. And it's not easy doing this alone. And it's not easy doing it with someone. But it's been an interesting journey as a family, as a married couple. So we're kind of newlyweds again. After 13 years of marriage, we feel like we're starting over again and getting to know each other again. And if we slip back into the taking each other for granted roles, we kind of, whoa, all right, this is what we did before. Let's regroup and acknowledge that the other one, this is how we do it. This is how I do it. This is how he does it. Now we got to figure out how to do it together. And I have hope. We're working on it. We're working on things.
That's really joyful to hear, and you know, through those things and how your care for Scotty and your love as a family triumphs in there, and that just that recognition of how men and women, how moms and dads just really function, and in terms of how we care for and how we look for support. And I think that really speaks and maybe gives some encouragement to some other families out there, particularly in relationships that are really struggling with those things, or even dads the other way around. Rita, one of the things that you shared because you were carrying some of those things was that Facebook turned out to be a catalyst, that you found a community that you were grateful for. And you described them as I think this is really great. I want to quote you. You said, the Angelman family, we are a hodgepodge of people. Parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and siblings of individuals with Angelman syndrome. We come from all over the world, and we come from all walks of life. We're teachers, doctors, construction workers, business owners, philanthropists, full-time parents, nurses, athletes, and even actors. I'll ask you about Colin Farrell a little bit later, but tell us about your engagement. Obviously, you know, because of how the dynamics that were in your family, getting some of the support.
Yeah.
You would have been looking elsewhere for other people to affirm you or point somewhere, or even listen to you rant and rave about some of the challenges that you've had. Tell us something about your engagement with Facebook or engagement with other parents whose children or family members had Angelman syndrome.
It's funny because in the very beginning, with the diagnosis, I withdrew. I didn't want to talk to any other parent. of someone with Angelman syndrome. I said I figured this out on my own, how to deal with his sensory processing. I figured out the water thing. I figured out everything. I don't need anybody. I really did. I withdrew. And it took a good year for me to finally come out of that place of, I'm so angry, I don't need someone else to tell me what to do with my son because I've already figured it out on my own. Dale Jackson from Niagara Falls was one of the very first moms. You, Darren, was one of the very first people I met on Facebook when I finally came out of that dark place. And I learned all about Elijah, and I would cry in the middle of the night, 2, 3, 4 in the morning. And through those tears, somehow I found my faith again. And I found some level of peace and hope. And you wouldn't think the passing of a young child would actually give you peace and hope. And I think you may have been the first person who reached out to me, introduced yourself, and I just took a plunge. Like, I dove into the Angelman community, and I realized I had something to offer too. I know how to navigate the system. I know how to help people find resources. So through my pain and learning from all of you, I started reaching out to other families when I heard that someone didn't have Medicaid, or they didn't get speech therapy, or something was denied in an IEP. I would learn where this family lived and find out how to navigate that system for their county. And so I still try to do that when I can. I help families navigate the IEP system, the Individualized Education Program, and districts. And my mission in life is to educate and encourage and empower. And I try to do that for myself too, because it's a constant journey for myself to keep pulling ourselves back up. And this Angelman community, I firmly believe, saved my soul. And I get my strength from all of you and my faith from all of you.
Well, thanks, Rita. For those of you who have joined us, well, maybe I can just respond by saying, I think there's something maybe quite unique about our conversation today. And, oh, goodness me, don't know how many other people might be out there on the journey that Elijah's life has touched as well. I did hear, just as we were getting set up earlier, I did hear you mentioned to Paul about your connection with me and with Elijah as well. And Paul and Vicky have got quite an interesting story there too. We talked about the impact of Elijah's life on and my connection with Paul and Vicky not long after Elijah had died. And so it never ceases to amaze me. Maybe I can just share in one of my darkest moments. In faith, I cried out to God and I said, and there's a passage in the Gospels in the Bible that says, unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains but a single grain. But if it dies, it can yield a harvest, a great harvest. And I see that that was some comfort to me, but more and more I began to see how Elijah's life, planted in his death, if I can use that expression, has borne and just continues to bear much fruit and encouragement and hope on the journey. Now I'm going to pass over to Paul, but just before I do, because I'm sure he's got a couple of questions he wants to put to almost Dr. Rita this morning. This is ALifeReal, and we're talking about stories from the journey, stuff that really encourages and gives people hope. So if you like what you're hearing or watching today, please don't hesitate to ask us for fashion tips. No, rather subscribe down here below. Push the subscribe button. Please put your comments in. And if if you'd like to share about your journey as well, and we have a waiting list almost as long as our arm. But hey, you know, we're around till probably at least 2025, 2030, if not longer, you know. So make a reservation there and let us know. Get in touch with Paul or get in touch with me, and we'd be happy to tee something up. Coming up actually on Monday, US time, there is a webinar in which Liz Sordia, I think it's Liz, from Angelman Today is going to be talking about resources and about organisations and about getting people connected. If you don't subscribe to Angelman Today, which is a fantastic online magazine, you should check out angelmantoday.com and get yourself over there. If you also have a look on that website or on Angelman Today Facebook group or on the Angelman Foundation Facebook group, you'll see the opportunity to sign up for the webinar, which is happening on Monday. I just really recommend that to you. Paul, over to you for some burning things that might be in your mind or on your heart to ask almost Dr. Rita about.
Yeah, certainly. I just want to really just pick up on some of the things that Rita said and just, you know, I think when Victoria and I first got diagnosed with AS, we had communication challenges and breakdowns in our communication and not being able to relate to each other, not really understanding, you know, where each other stood, and it's something learned. You know, it really is something learned, and you know, I completely get where you were when you were talking about Scott. You know, and yeah, if I was Scott, and I hope he'll watch this back and he'll look at what that interview, those moments of the interview where you just shared about Scott, that you'll be able to look at that and say, you know, this validates his whole journey as well. You know, it adds value to him and to his journey because he knows that the both of you together are in it together. God, I'm getting croaky talking about this myself now because I know, you know, I couldn't have been on this journey without Vicky in the same sense, and you know, we've had our own challenges and we've overcome them, and we've kind of learned to communicate better. And it's exactly like you say, it's like kind of resetting and saying, what would we have done in the past, but what would we do now? And we are chalk and cheese, we are opposites of each other, but I really just want to play to that and say, you know, I think that's a really strong point that you've made, and I think it was brutally honest as well, and I really appreciate the honesty with that. And I know should Scott watch this back, and I hope he will, that he takes that from the same point of view. You know, I think that's a really strong point, and I think that's a point well made. I think that's what I'm trying to say. So thank you for sharing that. My next one, again, just staying on the lines of communication. I know Darren's been speaking about and brought Facebook into the conversation. But really, in terms of your experiences, because, you know, going through that battle and that challenge of dealing with CP and then changing that paradigm now over into Angelman syndrome, how does the relationship with them professionals change? You know, what are the challenges that you faced with your professionals if you've now gone on this journey, and how do they support you? And I know you have one, I think in your thesis there's some stuff in there about dealing with professionals. So tell us some of your thoughts on that and some of your experiences on that.
The very first experience was with his pediatrician that I had for many years. I finally switched to one that I liked, the one who gave us the diagnosis for CP. So now Scotty's 7.5 years old, diagnosis of Angelman syndrome. I go back for a visit with him, and I said, so what do you think, Dr. Vetrano? It's Angelman syndrome. It's not cerebral palsy. He goes, really, Rita, does it make a difference? Do you love him any differently? Do you treat him any differently? And I said, it's been nice knowing you, Dr. Tony. I need to leave. I said, it makes a world of difference, and it's very sad that you don't understand. And my son Christopher was with me during that office visit, and he just looked at me. I said, yeah, your mom just kind of says the way it is. And the doctor just looked at me, and I left. And it's a huge difference. Not how I treat or love Scotty. Things make sense now. Those quirky little Angelman things that I'm like, what are you doing? What is this about? It makes sense now. and there's a whole community of other people who do these quirky things, and the poop parties, I just never understood that before I became part of the angels. I'm like, what is going on here? I know I joke, but it was a world of difference. People who understood the lack of sleep, we are the walking dead, us gentlemen parents, but yet we smile and laugh through it all. The obsession and fascination with water, our children, I don't know, my son has no fear whatsoever. And how do you parent a child with no fear? I felt like we belonged finally. I've been very isolated through the beginning journey, and as much as Scott's family and my family love us and adore us, they can't possibly give us what the Angelman family can give us. And it's not that they love us less. I hope I'm making sense. They just can't give us what the rest of us Angelman parents can give one another. And once I finally came out of my dark anger of, I don't need any of you, I did it on my own, I don't need you now, and I embraced everyone and everything about Angelman syndrome, it was like like I lost 500 pounds. Just a load was lifted off of me, and it was a huge difference. People understood me, and they accepted me for my quirky ways. I think we should do a study on us Angelman parents, because we are an odd bunch, an odd, loving, wonderful bunch, that other parents, even other special needs parents, look at us going, what is that all about? And we get it. And I just love it. And I remember saying I hated Angelman syndrome once, and Scott put it so beautifully. And he said there's never been a moment that he hated Angelman syndrome, because we wouldn't have all these wonderful people in our lives. Scotty wouldn't have this pure love and joy about him. I've learned more about love and joy through Scotty than I have from anyone in my life. And for me to say that I hate Angelman syndrome would be a disservice to my Scotty. And I just really appreciate for my husband correcting me and guiding me that, God, embrace what Angelman syndrome is about. No, we don't like the seizures. We don't like the migraines. We don't like the vomiting. We don't like the poop parties. But man, do we love that child and that pure heart. And I don't think I've ever thanked Scott for that correction. And I will never say I hate Angelman syndrome again. And that's what this diagnosis has done for me.
You know, sorry, Darren, I've just jumped in there just before, and you can come in just after me. Sorry, Darren. Is again, Rita, I think this is what it highlights for me personally. This is only my own point of view, Rita. Is that, you know, once you got the diagnosis of Angelman, and the same with CP as well, going back all of them years, that's what's kicked off your journey. You know, and you are on this journey, and you're on this journey with Scott, and you're on this journey with Scotty and your two wonderful sons as well. And this is all part of the journey of the learnings. It's not about the end destination, is it, Darren? I think you would probably agree with that.
Yes, absolutely, I would. You know, I think as we reflect back on those things, there are many things that our kids teach us, and one of the things that I think, and this is something that's a strength for you as well, is just the whole area of education. And that's what you've gone on and done further study, and that's what you've done your doctoral studies. And one story that just really spoke to me heaps, and I wondered if you might recount it for us. You shared about this in a Crazy Angel Mom blog in December 2013. Would you care to tell us about your encounter with the man in the hotel lobby in the Chicago Hyatt Regency? Because I think this is something that might be encouraging or for folks. Would you be happy to share that story again with us?
I would. The older gentleman, when the day we were leaving,
Sure.
that one.
Yes, please.
It was a rough visit. Actually, that weekend in Chicago, I didn't have as much fun and joy that weekend as I usually did because Scott didn't come. That was, we were struggling and not together, and so my son Christopher was with me, and it was different. And so I was struggling all weekend with missing Scott and missing what I usually take away from the weekend in Chicago. And there was this group of two older couples and sitting close to us, and Scotty's trying to get their attention, and I'm like, Scotty, stop, don't touch, just wave, say hi. And you can hear it in my voice that I'm getting frustrated, and I'm going to have another person get annoyed and agitated with my son because he's trying to touch him. And the gentleman says to me, it's all good. It's all good. And he's holding Scotty's hand, and he says to me, because you'll never know which or whose hand will pull you into heaven. And this, my dear, is going to be pulling a lot of people into heaven, this hand right here. And my whole attitude changed. And then his wife was sharing with me how she was an educator for 35 years, and they have a son named Scott that was developmentally delayed, and that their oldest son, Christopher, takes care of him. And that's where Scott lives, and that Christopher owns a restaurant, and Scott works in this restaurant, and he gave me so much hope. Because I know, like other Angelman parents, I lay awake at night wondering what's going to happen to my Scotty when I'm gone. And so as I'm having a conversation with the other couple and his wife, Scotty and this gentleman are having their own nonverbal conversation that I'm watching in my peripheral vision, and I'm actually trying not to cry. And Scotty does this thing where he goes forehead to forehead, and I've tried to teach him you don't do that with strangers. That's mommy and both your Bubbas, Bubba Ryan and Bubba Christopher, and that's daddy. And the gentleman knew exactly, like, that's it, we're talking, this is it, okay, and the man's just tears are falling down the man's face, and Scotty's doing his ooh, ah, ah, and we're all just silent. All the side conversations just stopped, and just watched this beautiful conversation with this incredible man and my son, and this man looks at me and he said, you've done a great job raising this beautiful blessing. And don't ever apologize for him touching anybody again. If someone doesn't want this hand to pull them into heaven, it's their loss. And I lost it. I just lost it. And that was definitely a pivotal moment for me, that there are people who will see the gifts in our children. And when my guard is up, I always feel like I'm in fighting mode. My guard's up. I'm ready to fight therapists, teachers, strangers, my husband, and I'm humbly reminded that I have to let those fists down to see the blessings that other people give us as well, and not just the blessings that Scotty gives to those. I hope that makes sense, but I do feel I'm in fight mode all the time. I have to be reminded there are people out there who will see the blessings in my Scotty.
Well, thanks, Rita. I think if anyone was to read your blog, they would see about the bitch mode as well, which maybe you referred some as well. What was that? I often saw a bumper sticker on the back of a lady's thing that says 0 to bitch in T minus 30 seconds or something like that. Maybe Paul, maybe I could just hog for a little bit longer. And you were talking about being in Chicago. Where you've been for some fast galas? Where you've been for some fast galas up there in December? And I think we might have even seen you on a Santa hustle down with some of the guys. Tell us about some of your encounters there, and maybe you could tell us about the other, maybe ranks about fifth on the list now from what I've heard. Your fifth heartthrob, which might be your encounter with Colin Farrell.
Oh yeah, good thing Scott's not a jealous man. When I say bitch mode, I used to be this very passive, people-pleasing person, and people needed to like me for me to feel validated. And since I've had Scotty, I've become very fearless. I'm fearless now. I say that he has no fear. He's given me that gift. I will tell a doctor off. I will tell a therapist, don't ever come near my son again. I will tell a teacher, I love you, but that was very ignorant of you. Don't say that again, that my son's not capable. I've become fearless. And that's where that bitch mode, I say, comes in, and I actually embrace it now. I couldn't be a good mother if I didn't have bitch mode, I think. But and I've struggled in the Santa hustle. I've done 3, and I push Scotty in his stroller, and I don't run. You will never see me run. I walk. But I have struggled with. I was sick for a while. I struggled with breathing. Part of my left lung is gone. I weighed up to 240 pounds. Weight and health has been an issue for the past 15 years. And when we went to our first gala, they said, let's do the Santa hustle. I said, are you nuts? I can't. Look at me. I can't. I can barely breathe. And I did it. And I've done 5Ks since, and with Scotty. And 3 of them are Santa hustles, and 2 are here local. And I did a 5K last year with Scotty, and we were the very last ones to cross the finish line. And we had the fire trucks and the police cars escorting us in. It was quite the spectacle. And this fireman leans down and he says, the one who crossed that finish line first is not the hero, you are. And I'm like, oh my goodness, thank you, you know, and I'm like, thank you. I could barely breathe. And it's just amazing what the gifts that Scotty's given me. Self-confidence, faith, mercy, grace, fearlessness, bitch mode. I'm grateful for all of them. And you mentioned Colin Farrell. The first time I met him was at our first gala in 2011. I never watched a movie. I barely knew who this person was. I just really saw tabloid articles of, you know, bad boy of Hollywood, and I don't have time for that. And I was living my own dramas. And we're in line to meet him. I even forgot Scott was standing there. There's pictures of me meeting Colin, and poor Scott's way off. And I shared with Colin. I said our stories are very similar. My son was diagnosed with CP first, but he was diagnosed at 7.5, and I'm aware that James was diagnosed at 4 years old. But very similar conversation with the doctor of, is he always as happy? Is he fascinated with water? And so when I said that to him, Colin came out and says, well, that's effing bullshit. Like, just came out and said that. And that's the moment I'm like, I love this man. He's so real. And he goes, my apologies. And Scott says, oh, please. She curses like a sailor. Don't worry about it. You didn't offend her. And Scott says to Colin, thank you so much for what you do for our children. And Colin humbly and sincerely said, I do nothing. I'm no one special. Who am I? I'm a parent like you who adores and loves and is proud of their son. And that's the moment I fell in love with Colin Farrell. Never saw a movie. Didn't even know if he could act or not. I fell in love with him as an angel dad and as a person.
Right. But you have watched more of his movies since, though, haven't you?
I've seen every single movie now, at least 5 times each.
One of the things that you also wrote on your blog that I just wanted to ask you to just speak to as well, and your heading on a blog entry on October the 13th was "Our Children Are Able," and it's not only about the language of inclusion in terms of our children, specifically in education, but it's a whole mind frame. It's a whole paradigm, really, isn't it? When we talk about the abilities of our children. I know that Elijah was able to be featured in a book more recently called The Superpower Baby Project, and the parents of this little girl who only lived a couple of years began to recognise her superpowers, things that she had abilities to do, rather than using the language of deficiencies. And your encouragement in your writing and in those things is not to shut down the possibilities of outcomes and things for our kids as well. Maybe you'd like to there be some words of encouragement out of your experience. Maybe there's a couple of examples of some things you'd like to share that Scotty has achieved that, you know, might have been beyond what doctors or professionals or therapists might have expected. And maybe just address that to the other parents of children who are out there who are maybe they're weighed down, or their sights are set low on the fact that they think on this whole language of deficiency. You know, you used I talked about the R word, and when particularly parents would see, oh, my child is never going to. Would you like to comment and maybe just provide some encouragement to parents?
Absolutely. There's a point that I was grateful that I didn't have the diagnosis of Angelman syndrome right away, because I think we just had high expectations that Scotty will someday do this. He will someday walk. He will someday communicate. He will one day feed himself. And I think if I would have had that Angelman syndrome with what was out back then in 2002 and 2003, we may have been drawn into the deficiency mindset. But then again, knowing me and my feistiness, I probably would have snapped out of it pretty quickly. But we just give our children a disadvantage when we look at what they cannot do. Scotty has always been an observer, and I think what we think what observing should look like, we project that onto our kiddos with Angelman syndrome. So when I'm observing, I'm looking at you, I do eye contact, I look away a little bit, but I'm showing interest, and you can tell I'm paying attention to you. Our kids with Angelman syndrome are paying attention to everything, but how they're paying attention is not what we think is the way we should be focusing. They're maybe looking all over the place, they're playing with the iPad, they're in constant motion, but they're taking it all in. They're paying attention. And I learned that with Scotty when I walked away and left my laptop on the bed, and he's navigating my laptop at 5 years old, finding the YouTube videos that he wanted. And I'm thinking he's just so in his own world, not paying attention, and he's so aware of everything. I always said, the day he does speak in sentences, I'm in trouble, because he knows all my secrets, and he is going to tell on me. He knows what I think and feel about every single person in my life. I'm in trouble. But I was told that give up hope on the potty issue. He takes himself to go on the toilet. We're not 100% there. When seizure activity is on the rise, pottying is on the decrease. But he'll go sit by himself, and teachers will say, well, he's not doing that at school. I said, because you have convinced yourself that he's incapable of doing it at school. He communicates with his iPad with me. I had a headache one day. I wasn't feeling well, and he found the free app, that communication app. I think it was like Tap to Talk. It was a free app, and he heard nap, nap, mom, mom, nap, nap, mom, mom. And I just looked at him and started crying, and I said, yeah, Mommy needs a nap. She's not feeling well. And then he said, bad, bad, mom, mom, nap, nap, bad. I'm like, yes, Mommy's being bad right now because she doesn't feel well. And there was this full conversation, and I just get so frustrated with myself when I fall into that role of deficiency. Our children are so capable. We are so used to thinking of intelligence one-dimensional, these standardized tests that we give our children. And if you don't do well on standardized tests, you are cognitively delayed. You are not going to succeed. You are not going to do well academically or professionally. And Scotty's emotional intelligence far surpasses mine and many other adults. He's brilliant. He's a genius. Problem solving, genius. I watch him problem solve, how to get something, how to do something. There's music, artistic, creative. I mean, we're so one-dimensional as adults, and our children are suffering because of it. And that one blog entry, I was so fueled up with anger that a newly diagnosed family was saying, I know my son will never do this, using the R word, and we have to face reality. Why do you give false hope to newly diagnosed families? And I was so angry. And these are well-educated parents who were talking like this. But ignorance comes in all forms. I don't care how educated you are, what letters you have next to your name. You can still be ignorant. And to have ignorance for our children, I just think is horrible and horrendous. And our children are so capable of so much if we just pay attention and have that patience that we need. I'm not the most patient person in the world. Just ask my older sons and my husband. But for some reason, when it comes to Scotty, there's a never-ending patience because he has it for me. It's like he tells me, I know you messed up. I forgive you, Mom. You didn't pay attention to my communication that I had to go on the potty, and now I made a mess. I forgive you, Mom. So those poop parties are sometimes on me because he's trying to communicate to me. And when I miss those subtle cues, I apologize to him for my failing him. And he's got such never-ending patience for me. How can I not have it for him? Because I see his wheels turning. I see how smart he is. And just because he can't use words like you and I do, he's not any less intelligent or less capable. And when we treat our children less than capable, they will become less than capable. And that breaks my heart because they're going to stop trying if people around them don't believe that they're capable. And
I know that when we were speaking offline, Rita, is that you'd watched the interview last week with Susan, and just to play to your point again, Rita, is Susan and I were both in agreement, and I agree with everything that you're saying. Is that there is a hump to get over, which is You won't walk, you won't talk, you won't sign, you won't, and then suddenly it does become about, well, what can we do, and this is what's going to happen, and we don't know when it's going to happen, but we know at some point it is. And I think, you know, the more and more angel parents I speak to, I think the more, you know, the longer their journey and the more experienced their journey, they become to get over those hurdles. And I don't know if it's just something that happens in the early journey and you listen too much to the professionals, or whether it's their own journey and they learn and they watch and observe exactly as you have. And Vicky and I have done the same. You know, we see Sebastian solving them conundrums for himself, and we're like, how on earth did he figure that out? That's fantastic. YouTube videos, my iPad, he knows where YouTube is. He can find that damn Stampy on Minecraft every single time. My iPad, Harry's iPad, his own iPad, he knows what to do. He's amazing, and I think you're absolutely right. And I know Susan last week had also referenced the fact, you know, that it is about getting over them hurdles and changing them viewpoints from no's to yeses. And I think that's really, really good. And I just want to touch back onto something, if you don't mind. I just want to take us back several steps, and I apologise for doing so. You were mentioning the siblings. How is the relationship with the siblings between your husband and yourself in terms of how they interact with yourselves? You were saying before, you know, they play carer role, and one of them is the strong, stern, looking after, baby brother. But in terms of sibling dynamics, there tends to be, you know, through research, is that siblings tend to distance themselves from parents, maybe don't want to put upon the parents due to them already having too much to deal with. Is there anything there that you'd like to share, and anything, you know, from your experience that you think's of value there?
Yeah, there really is. Not only are we a family with a child with extraordinary needs, we're also a blended family. My older boys are not Scott's biological children, so that brings its own dynamics into play. So there is some tension between the oldest son, Ryan, and Scott, because Ryan stepped into the caregiver role and now someone else took over it. So there is a typical power struggle there. And my middle son, Christopher, who's graduating tomorrow from high school, had some struggles this year. He's I brag about him. He's a football star, and he got hurt this season. Needed knee surgery, so he had a tough time. Some of those top schools stopped knocking on the door for him to go play college for them. So we had a rough patch of him finding his hope again in the football part of it and what his dreams were. And he was struggling in school, just getting work done on time, and just he had so much on his mind. And one of his teachers called me about he's worried about Christopher, and you know, he's usually this happy-go-lucky guy, you know, the cut up in class, and we're worried about him. He's not doing his work. He seems down. And so I had a talk with Christopher, and I've never seen my son become so angry. How dare him call you? You don't need to deal with this. I got it under control. Don't worry about me. I'm going to go tell that teacher what I think. And I said, honey, I apologize if I have not paid attention to what's going on with you. And that even upset him even more. And I found a letter that he actually had written. He had typed the letter to his teacher to do not call my mother again. You don't understand what my mother has to go through. She takes care of my little brother by herself. She's, for the first time, working as a full-time teacher. She doesn't need these hassles from you. I've learned at a young age to handle my problems by myself, and I'm reading this, and my heart is breaking because I think I'm in tune with my children, and I totally miss this. Totally miss this. And I felt that I failed my older boys. I missed some important parts, turning points for them that I wasn't there for them. I don't know if I wasn't able to be, or if it was, I don't know. And it broke my heart. So yeah, that goes on. And he was going to go away to school to play football in Pennsylvania. And then he wanted to stay home. And I had a conversation with him that, honey, don't stay home for me. This is your time. This is for you. And I said, I know you want to stay home because you're afraid to leave Scotty and me. And that young man said to me, everybody leaves you, Mom. I can't leave you. He can't carry that burden. He can't, and I won't let him. And he is staying home playing football right now, come the fall. But he has a plan. And the plan is to go to this junior college and play here. And come junior year, those top colleges will want him again, and then he'll go. But he says it was a football career move, but I have a feeling he doesn't want to leave Scotty and me. So those dynamics definitely play. And where the oldest son left. He left and he ran fast. He he needed to get away. He loves us, but this life is not easy for him. So
the you know, and I'm going to bring the mortality issue into this conversation as well. Yeah. Again, as you know, I had that conversation with Susan as well, but I think it's also crucially important here, because one of the things I was saying to Susan was, you know, my want for my youngest son, Harrison, was not to be the person to step in to look after Sebastian. I don't want the burden of when we go to be on Harrison, and I want to experience all of them individual things, exactly as you've just said. With Harrison, I want to be there. I want to know about these things. And you know, he's only 6 now, but we're starting to see that there are things that we don't pick up on, that maybe he's not communicating with us. And you know, for that whole mortality issue for me and Vicky, you know, what happens when we're gone? We don't want that for Harrison, and I'm pretty sure you're the same really with your 2 boys. What kind of discussions do you have? Because obviously your boys are quite mature and they're able to have certain conversations. What are their indications to yourselves, and what have you indicated back?
Well, you might think differently of me for sharing this, but I do have a bit of a sense of humor, and I told them if Scotty's put in a home after I die, I will come back and haunt them. And and I hope you know a little bit of my personality, that there's half truth in there. But there was a point where they both were actually fighting over who Scotty's going to go live with. Ryan's like, well, I'm the oldest. It makes sense he's coming with me. And Christopher's like, you've never even changed his diaper. You don't even know how to give him his meds. Have you ever given him a bath? And I sat there for a moment going, I really am blessed. They are actually fighting over who's taking Scotty when they're adults. But the realization sets in with them, like, oh crap, what if I do have to take Scotty? You know, now that they are older and they realize what is going to happen. And I think that's part of Ryan leaving the state. And we had that conversation, and I said, I am sorry for many things, Ryan, but I will never apologize for Scotty. I will never apologize that we have Scotty. And he broke down and said, I hope I never made you feel that you have to apologize for Scotty. And he said, this is something I have to live with, that I don't know how to embrace this like you and Christopher have. It's harder for him to acknowledge all of Scotty's needs, and that it may fall on him. And I told him I would never do that to him. I still don't know what's going to happen. I don't have a living will. I don't know. And I know both boys feel that burden and carry it, and we do tend to lighten things up with our humor. I said, I don't know what's going to happen or how you make it work, but I will haunt you if he's in home. But we do have to have we had to have some serious conversations when I was sick. I mean, I had 12 surgeries from the year 2007 to 2011. And it was scary for a while. Mortality was slapping us in the face, my mortality. And my worry, can Scott do this without me? Is he going to be able to do it alone? What's going to happen with my older boys? Are they going to want to stay with their stepdad? And I just think a lot of healing has to take place for us to have a real conversation of what's going to happen when we do go. But we have to heal and work some things out before these conversations take place.
Thanks, Rita, for sharing in such a raw way, and that's really what our conversations are about, real stuff on the journey. That's how for those of you who've been listening and watching, you probably wouldn't have jumped in directly at this point, but you're listening to a conversation today with Rita, all the way from the United States, along with Paul Boone from the UK and myself. We are talking about stories from the journey. Just let me encourage you again, subscribe if you want to see more of hear more of these things, or things that you might want to feedback or encourage, or speak about how Rita's journey is impacting or speaking to you. Please don't hesitate to do that in the comments down below as well. It's we are probably going to move towards concluding our conversation a little bit, because I know that Paul's heading towards the very, very late hour, and his pumpkin his coach is well and truly turned into a pumpkin. We're just grateful for technology and the dynamics of being able to have this conversation. Me in New Zealand at 2:30 in the afternoon, Paul at 3:30 a.m. in the UK, and Rita, what's the time now? Must be about 10:30 your time too. Mm-hmm. Sure. I'm going to leap in and say, ask Paul's question, one of his favourite questions. If you were to look back and something you would say to yourself, maybe pre-diagnosis, what would maybe be the top three things that you might say to yourself? How old's Scotty now? So that's we're almost 10 years ago or so. What would be the three key things you think you would say to yourself? You might say to yourself, Rita?
Lighten up. I took things very seriously. I had to be the perfect mom, so I would say lighten up. Appreciate your husband's efforts. They look different than yours, but they're there. And don't shut down. Stay open to the people who love you. Stay open and don't shut down ever again.
I love that, actually, to be quite honest with you. I mean, how do you, as Darren said there, he's asked my question already, but, I wish I'd have asked that question if I knew you were going to give them answers. I mean, that's pretty good, and I think, on my journey, just relating to yours again, Rita, is that I took myself too seriously at the very, very beginning, and it's only now I'm beginning to feel a little bit more lighthearted, and, the 2009, 2011, for me, I was just really beginning to grow into the community, and, the community was a bit fractious at that time about many different things in many different areas, but I think all of that friction's now kind of ebbed away, and I think people are able to be more relaxed with each other and really appreciating one. I think really more than anything, Facebook was really more of a new thing for all of those families as well. They were learning about the medium and learning how to express themselves online, so I think that's probably what most of it was about. But just in terms of and I absolutely take it, which is just lighten up, chill out, but sometimes it's very hard to do that, isn't it, Darren?
Yes. I was just looking for the mute button. And those of you who might follow me on Facebook might also recognise that there are little things like moon dances. Oh, whoops! No, it wasn't a moon dance, but a sun dance and a rain dance and some of those sorts of things. I think those are some of the things that our kids give us the gift of as well, particularly when we're out and about. You know, the people who's the good-looking young lady, good-looking ladies whose dresses get pulled or stockings get pinged, or what we might think is actually really inappropriate. I think perhaps, Rita, you've stumbled onto something. In fact, our sons and our daughters, or those relations of ours who are impacted by Angelman syndrome, have a lot to teach us about lightening up. You know, if perhaps we were only to take our cue from them. Rita, it's been great to talk with you today. Maybe just in conclusion, you know, we asked you for maybe 3 things that you might say to yourself some time ago. What would be 3 things? Again, 3 is always a good number. 3 things that give you the most hope for yourself and for your family, but most of all for Scotty on the journey ahead.
What gives me hope is there's so many of us fighting and advocating for our children. Someone might be in the medical field, in the research field, me in the educational field. That gives me hope. We have a lot of fearless fighting Angelman parents. What else gives me hope is love and forgiveness. I would have never guessed that Scott and I would be back together. And whatever anyone's beliefs are, that's a pure God thing, and that gives me hope. And what gives me hope is that I think I'm grounded in reality, but I always hope for a better future, if that makes sense.
No, well, I just want to say, Rita, I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with yourself and Darren this evening. I admire your honesty. I admire your ability to step out and say some things, you know, which I admire. I really have to play to, you know. I think it's been a great interview. Thank you for sharing your journey. And, you know, I think there's loads more we've got to talk about, and I'm sure, Darren, as we go along, we'll have Rita back at some point and take some more points as well, which I think is really cool. But Darren, let me just hand over to you and let you do the wrap-up formally for this episode of ALifeReal.
Sure, thanks, Paul. Rita, again, just a beautiful, raw story. And, you know, lots of people out there, as we journey our lives, we like to wear masks, don't we? And we like to sort of peer through, and sometimes we like to appear to just have it all together. And you know, I think you've peeled back that today, and I hope that many people who are watching and have heard your story are also given permission to do so with people around them as well. They're able to feel like they can share in a very real and a raw way, instead of having to try and journey with a mask a lot, eh? So it's always a great joy to, and it's really humbling, and it's great to be able to share the journey with other people. Stories from the journey, and following this, and actually there'll be some subtitles as we get, not subtitles, just in case you had another language, there'll be some subtitles with the link across to the Crazy Angel Mom blog, and you can read some of the great stuff that that the almost Dr. Rita has published. There's some really great stuff in there, and she doesn't cease to be raw. And perhaps she could even she could give you some tutorials on bitch mode if you're really in need of that. Look, subscribe again if you will. Leave your comments. from us here in New Zealand and the UK, and from Williamsville, New York State. This has been ALifeReal. And until next time, take care, subscribe, and we'll talk to you again soon.